The door slammed in my face so hard that the wreath rattled, scattering pine needles across the icy porch. Through the glass, I caught my mother's shadow moving quickly back into the warm, glowing house. And then I heard it, her voice muffled, but clear enough to slice straight through me. Just an ordinary beggar. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe she wasn't talking about me. But the silence that followed told me otherwise. The laughter inside carried on glasses, clinking music swelling as if I'd never existed. I stood there, boots crunching on ice, holding a heavy bag of gifts meant for the very people who had just erased me. You'd think this was the climax of my story, the final betrayal after years of rejection. But no, it was only another chapter in a life where I had always been the family's mistake, the daughter they never wanted to admit to. I'm Alice, 26 years old, and I've been the black sheep of my family since the day I decided to stop living for their approval. It started young, high school to be exact. I got my first tattoo, a tiny bird barely the size of a coin, inked on my forearm. To me, it meant freedom. To them, it was a crime. Mom cried as if I'd committed murder. Dad refused to even look at me at dinner, muttering under his breath that I was ruining my life. When I pierced my tongue that same year, Mom dropped a casserole dish in horror. The shattering glass on the tile felt almost symbolic. Meanwhile, my sister Alexis was at her peak, perfect hair, perfect grades, perfect boyfriend. The golden child. She was crowned prom queen the same week I sat in a tattoo chair for the second time. And from that moment on, my life became a constant refrain. Why can't you be more like your sister? By the time I turned 18, I'd had enough. My hair was dyed electric blue, another crime in their eyes. Dad's verdict was final. We won't pay for college if you insist on looking like this. Mom nodded, lips tight, as if the conversation had already ended. So I ended it for them. I packed my bag that night and walked out the blue, still staining my fingers from the dye. The smell of rebellion clinging to me like smoke. It wasn't easy. I spent nights on my friend Zach's couch, ate instant noodles, worked whatever shifts I could get. Bartending at a dive called the Rusty Nail kept me afloat. My parents didn't check on me, but I stopped expecting them to. Oddly enough, I found comfort among strangers, the ones who tipped me extra because they liked my tattoos, or who laughed at my sarcastic banter instead of shaming me for it. Every dollar I saved was a defiance, and by 22 I had enough to enroll in community college. Not in law or medicine, the things my parents might have bragged about if I'd been Alexis. No, I chose coding. Lines of logic and language that didn't care if my hair was blue or if ink covered my skin. That's where I met Maya. Half her head shaved, tattoos like vines up her neck, the sharpest mind in the room. She saw me. Not the rebellion, not the shame, just me. Let's start our own thing, she said one night. Eyes bright, despite our exhaustion over a final project. Everyone needs apps. Why should we build them for someone else when we could build them for us? 2 years later, we launched Blue Code Solutions. By 26, I had my own apartment uptown, a 6-figure income, and a company with my name on it. But here's the irony for all the success, all the independence. I still couldn't shake one small, stupid hope that maybe one day when I knocked on my parents' door, they'd actually want me to come in. And that hope is what made their rejection on Christmas Eve cut deeper than any knife. The Christmas door slam haunted me for weeks, but here's the cruelest part. It wasn't the first time I'd been treated like an intruder in my own family. It was just the loudest. Because despite all my achievements to them, I was still the shameful secret. At 26, I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. Blue Code Solutions had exploded what started in Maya's cluttered apartment with ramen cups and tangled charger cords, turned into sleek office space with clients who actually said things like, "We're impressed with your team's professionalism." Professionalism, a word I never heard from my parents. They didn't hate the money, though. Not when Dad's car broke down and he couldn't afford the repairs. I wrote the check. Not when Mom needed expensive dental work. I covered that too. Even when they decided the kitchen needed a modern renovation, I funded the marble counters and shiny new appliances. You'd think helping them would soften something between us, that maybe gratitude could loosen the chains of their judgment. But somehow, no matter how many checks I signed, I was never on the guest list. Thanksgiving dinners. No invitation. Birthday parties must have gotten lost in the mail. Even casual brunches turned into family affairs I only discovered later on social media. Alexis smiling perfectly in every picture. It hurt. Of course it did, but pain eventually calcifies. Instead of crying about it, I made it a game. I'd show up uninvited, gifts in hand, smile plastered on my face. Stay an hour. Pretend it was normal. Then leave. It was the dance we all performed, and I learned the steps by heart. Alexis tolerated me better than they did, though tolerated is a generous word. She'd text when she needed something, a contact advice, or more often money. The last one came packaged in careful wording, as if she thought she could sneak it past me. The day she showed up at my apartment with wedding magazines spilling from her tote bag, I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. Richard's parents are loaded, she gushed, flipping through glossy pages of gowns and flower arrangements. But we're expected to pay half. Mom and Dad can't afford it, and I need this wedding to be perfect. All my friends had these beautiful ceremonies, and She cut herself off with a practiced sigh, her eyes wet with anticipation. I stared at her half amused, half exhausted. How much? Her face brightened, as if relieved she didn't have to keep up the act. 60,000. It'll cover half the costs. I'll pay you back. I laughed at that short, humorless sound. No, you won't. But fine. Family helping family, right? And I did it. I agreed. Because even after everything, even after slammed doors and whispered insults, I still carried this fragile, desperate hope that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe just maybe they'd finally let me stand beside them instead of outside looking in. I transferred the money into a joint account, specifically for the wedding, swallowing the bitterness like medicine. But as Alexis gathered her magazines chattering about floral arches and champagne fountains, one thought nagged at me. 2 years she'd been with Richard, and I'd never met him. Not once. Every chance had been dodged. He was sick. He was working late. He was out of town. Always absent, always invisible. And though I brushed the thought aside, part of me already knew the truth. They weren't hiding Richard from me. They were hiding me from him. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the familiar driveway, a bag of carefully wrapped gifts digging into my shoulder. A vintage watch for Dad, the one he'd been eyeing in a shop window for months. A spa package for Mom, because even after all the cruelty, I still wanted her to feel cared for. And for Alexis, an envelope thick with cash, a honeymoon fund. I wasn't expecting gratitude. I wasn't expecting love. Just a seat at the table, maybe a glass of wine by the fire, a fleeting illusion of belonging. An unfamiliar car glistened in the driveway, a black Mercedes polished to perfection. Maybe a distant cousin, maybe a new friend of my parents. My pulse quickened with nerves as I knocked on the door. The house was alive with laughter and music, the smell of roasted turkey drifting out with every muffled cheer. For one fragile moment, I imagined my mother opening the door with surprise, then warmth. Alice, you came. Instead, when the door creaked open, Mom's face fell like she'd seen a ghost. Alice, she hissed, her body blocking the entryway. What are you doing here? Merry Christmas to you, too. I tried forcing a smile. I lifted the bag. I brought gifts. I stepped forward, but her hand shot out, pressing against my shoulder with surprising force. Behind her glasses, clinked voices rose in cheer. You can't come in, she whispered urgently. Her eyes darted to the side like someone might see us. Not now. Mom, it's freezing. Just let me drop these off. Before I could finish, she shoved me. Hard. My boots slid on the ice. I nearly fell backward down the steps. The door slammed the sound like a gunshot. I stood there, stunned snowflakes catching in my blue hair. Through the heavy wood, muffled voices drifted. Who was that? A man asked. And then came her answer, words that hollowed me out. Nobody. Just an ordinary beggar. The gifts in my arms suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. The air left my lungs. My own mother, who I had saved, supported, covered in marble countertops and dentist bills, reduced me to nothing more than a stray at her doorstep. I could have banged on the door, screamed, forced her guests to witness the truth. But what was the point? Rage only feeds the fire they set for you. So I walked back to my car, every step heavy with humiliation. The bag hit the back seat with a dull thud. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Tears didn't come. I was too numb for that. On the drive back downtown, my headlights illuminated the shelter where I sometimes volunteered. A string of cheap lights blinked in the windows. People I barely knew. People my parents dismissed as worthless would welcome me without hesitation. Without thinking, I pulled in. Inside the hall was warm, crowded with volunteers serving a modest Christmas dinner. Kids darted between tables, their laughter real and unforced. I handed out my family's gifts one by one. Dad's watch went to a man preparing for a job interview. Mom's spa package to a woman healing from years of abuse. The honeymoon fund I split among 3 families with children, their eyes wide with gratitude. Every thank you, every hug filled a place in me my own family had left empty. Strangers saw my worth when the people who raised me never had. Later at Zach's annual Misfits Christmas party, the sting of rejection dulled under the warmth of chosen family. Maya raised a glass when I arrived, her tattoos glinting under the string lights. There she is, I was starting to worry. What happened? Zach asked, handing me a drink. I told them. The slam of the door. The words. Just an ordinary beggar. No one gasped in surprise, they all just nodded. The kind of nod that says, yeah, we've been there. My mom did the same, Dylan said, quietly tugging at the sleeves covering his ink. Told me I could come to dinner if I wore long sleeves, no piercings. My dad pretended not to know me in front of his boss, Kai, added their fork pushing food around the plate, like I was contagious. Maya leaned in, refilling my glass. They'll never understand us, but we're here. We see you. We laughed together that night, but it wasn't the careless laughter from my parents' living room. Ours was threaded with pain, survival, and solidarity. It was real. And though my mother's words still rang in my ears, surrounded by people who chose me without condition, I started to believe maybe I wasn't the beggar at all. The morning after Christmas, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Mom. For a split second, hope flickered. Maybe she'd regretted last night. Maybe she'd realized how cruel she'd been. I answered, my voice tight. Hello. Her tone was soft, rehearsed. Alice, about last night. We didn't mean to hurt you. You have to understand. We had important guests. Richard's parents are very traditional, very conservative. If they saw you like that, like what I cut in, like myself, a pause, then almost apologetic, you would have made everyone uncomfortable. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of her words crushing me. So you're ashamed of me. It's not like that, she rushed. It's about appearances. You know how these things matter. And honey, Alexis asked us to tell you she doesn't think it's a good idea for you to come to the wedding either. She's worried about the photos. The aesthetic, you understand. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Excuse me. She still loves you, Mom added quickly, as though that softened the blow. She just doesn't want you to stand out in the wrong way. You understand, don't you? I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My phone buzzed again and again, but I ignored it. The truth hit like a freight train. Not only was I unwanted at their Christmas table, I was also banned from the wedding I was paying for. $60,000. That was the price of my exile. My hands trembled as I grabbed my laptop. The joint account Alexis had set up for wedding expenses blinked on the screen, the balance still fat with my transfer. She'd already drained about $15,000 for deposits, venue, caterer, florals, but the rest sat untouched. With a few keystrokes, I froze it. Canceled every scheduled payment. The screen confirmed the action, access restricted, pending review. I sat back, heart racing, a cocktail of fear and adrenaline surging through me. For once, I wasn't begging for their approval. For once, I wasn't their silent ATM. For 2 weeks, silence. No calls, no texts. Just an eerie calm, like the air before a storm. Then my phone erupted one afternoon. Notifications stacked one after another. Fix this now, Dad texted. Your sister's wedding is collapsing because of you, another message screamed. I can't pick up my dress. The account is blocked. Do something, Alexis pleaded in all caps. I deleted them all, but silence never lasts. The pounding on my apartment door rattled the frame, sharp and insistent. I checked my security feed, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Alexis. My family looking like a trio of ghosts in the hallway. Alexis's mascara streaked down her face. Mom's lips were thin with fury, though she kept glancing at the camera as if trying to appear composed. Dad looked weary, shoulders sagging with defeat. I didn't open the door. I just stood there watching them from the safety of my side. Who's there? I called, though I knew. It's us! Alexis's voice cracked thick with tears. Me, Mom, and Dad. A laugh escaped me, bitter and sharp. Oh, I thought it was Beggar's knocking. The silence that followed was a knife twist. I could almost see the shock on their faces. So this is revenge, Alexis snapped first, her voice rising. You're destroying my wedding because Mom made one stupid comment. No, I said, my voice steady for once. This isn't about a comment. This is about years of hiding me, erasing me, using me when it was convenient. You don't want me in your photos, Alexis. You don't want me in your life, but you'll take my $60,000 not anymore. Mom's voice trembled. Honey, please. It was just a Christmas joke. We didn't think you'd take it so personally. I barked a laugh colder than the December air. So here's my joke, the bank account's frozen. Open this door right now. Alexis's fists hammered against the wood. We need to talk. You can't ruin everything I've worked for. You mean everything I paid for, I shot back. Alice, please. Dad's voice broke through softer pleading. Your sister's devastated. I don't care, I said and meant it. For the first time in my life, I meant it. Get out before I call the police. Through the camera, I watched them argue in hushed, desperate tones. Then slowly they retreated. The slam of the elevator doors was almost satisfying. When silence fell again, I slid to the floor, my back against the door. I expected guilt to rise or sadness, but all I felt was lightness, like a chain had finally snapped free. For once, I wasn't the beggar. A week after the confrontation at my door, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct told me to answer. Is this Alice Thompson? The woman's voice was calm, elegant, clipped in a way that suggested confidence. Yes, I said cautiously. Who's this? My name is Barbara Mitchell. I'm Richard's mother. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. What? We were hoping we could meet. She continued smoothly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Richard, myself, his father George, and his younger brother Timothy. Tomorrow, perhaps noon, at Riverside Cafe. Suspicion prickled through me. How did you even get my number? Alexis told us, Barbara replied without hesitation. She mentioned you were sponsoring her wedding. We were quite shocked we hadn't even been told she had a sister. Her words landed like a punch. Alexis hadn't just excluded me, she'd erased me. Still, curiosity outweighed my anger. Fine, I'll be there. Good, Barbara said, and I could hear the faintest smile in her tone. Don't worry, we'll recognize you. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my reflection in the darkened phone screen. The next day, I arrived early. I made no effort to hide myself. Ripped jeans, leather jacket, band tee, tattoos, visible, blue hair, freshly dyed and defiantly bright. If they were as conservative as my parents claimed, I wanted them to see me exactly as I was. At precisely noon, the cafe doors opened. A group walked in and Barbara, elegant in a tailored coat, George beside her, with kind eyes. Behind them was Richard, tall, clean-cut, and beside him a teenager with black-dyed hair and a silver ring glinting from his nose. They spotted me instantly. Barbara approached first, her hand extended in genuine warmth. You must be Alice. Thank you for meeting us. I shook her hand, bracing for the flicker of disapproval in her eyes. It never came. Dude, your hair is awesome, the teenager blurted, grinning wide. Can I get a picture with you? When I'm 18, I'm getting tattoos like that. Barbara chuckled. Timothy let her breathe. Richard stepped forward, then offering his hand. It's good to finally meet you. Funny Alexis never mentioned you. We sat down. I couldn't hold the question in. So, you're not put off by this? I gestured at myself. Blue hair piercings, ink curling up my arms. Barbara tilted her head, confused. Why would we be... I blinked. My parents told me you were very traditional, conservative, that you'd judge me. George laughed softly. Traditional. My brother runs a motorcycle shop and has a full back tattoo. Our niece has more piercings than you. Honestly, we thought you'd judge us for being boring. The realization hit me like ice water. It had never been about Richard's family. It had always been about mine, ashamed of me, afraid to let anyone see me. Richard leaned in, brow furrowed. Is it true you're paying for Alexis's wedding $60,000? Yes, I said flatly. At least I was. 15's already gone to deposits, but I froze the rest. His eyes widened. 60. We agreed on 40 from each family. Mom and Dad even tried to convince us to keep it smaller. Alexis insisted on bigger. Barbara's expression hardened. So the extra 20, where was that supposed to go? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages, screenshots of Alexis asking for the 60 notes from my parents, thanking me, invoices forwarded to me directly. I set it on the table. Silence hung heavy. They planned to pocket it, Barbara said finally, her voice low but sharp, or funnel it somewhere else. Richard exhaled, shaking his head. I can't believe this. All this time. Alexis made it sound like you were some irresponsible sister we couldn't risk around the family. But really, she was hiding her own lies. Timothy muttered under his breath, Guess she's the beggar, not you. Something in my chest cracked at that. I almost laughed, but the truth of it stung too much. By the end of the meeting, the Mitchells had thanked me for my honesty. Barbara hugged me tightly before leaving a gesture that felt foreign, but strangely comforting. As they walked away, I sat frozen in the cafe booth, the weight of the revelation pressing down. All this time I thought I was the embarrassment, but the real disgrace was theirs. I didn't hear from the Mitchells again right away. Days passed, then a week. The silence was heavy, but not hostile. I imagined their home filled with sharp conversations, truths unraveling. Alexis caught between the web she'd spun and the people she couldn't deceive anymore. Then one morning, as I scrolled aimlessly through my feed, the headline caught my eye. Not from the news, but from Alexis's own carefully curated account. After much consideration and mutual agreement, Richard and I have decided to end our engagement. Our wedding will not be taking place. A staged photo of her alone makeup, flawless but eyes red. A caption begging for privacy during this difficult time. I stared at the screen, my coffee cooling beside me. Part of me expected triumph, a vindicated surge of, this is what you get. Instead, all I felt was a hollow ache. Did I cause this? Was it my fault? Then I remembered $60,000 begged from me while I was barred from the very ceremony. Lies stacked on lies. A mother who called me nobody. A sister who erased me from her fiancé's life. No, this wasn't my fault. Truth had only pulled the curtain back. 2 days later, an email arrived in my inbox. The subject line read, "I hope you're happy now." Against my better judgment, I opened it. Alice, I hope you're satisfied. You've always been jealous of me because I can be loved, because I fit in where you never could. You couldn't stand to see me happy, so you poisoned Richard's family against me with your lies. You've ruined everything. My chance at love, at the perfect life. And you did it because you've always hated me. Congratulations. I have nothing left to say to you. Don't respond. I read it twice. The words blurred not from tears, but from sheer disbelief. Even now, even after her lies unraveled, Alexis still managed to crown herself the victim. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Nothing I wrote would puncture the story she'd already crafted in her head. The weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. Blue Code Solutions landed 2 new clients, Maya and I interviewing potential hires to expand our team. At night, I returned to the shelter this time with laptops and volunteer lessons. Teaching basic coding to residents, watching their eyes light up when a line of code actually worked, gave me a satisfaction money never had. One evening, as I packed up after class, Zach swung by with takeout. "You seem lighter," he said, watching me with a smirk. Lighter, yeah. Like you finally dropped that boulder you've been carrying since high school. I thought about it. The years of begging for inclusion, buying my way into rooms where I was never truly wanted. The slammed doors, the whispered insults, the family photos where I never appeared. And then that cafe booth with Barbara Mitchell's steady gaze, Timothy's casual admiration, Richard's shock at Alexis's lies. I guess I did, I admitted quietly. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't the problem to fix. Months passed. Seasons shifted, deadlines blurred, life carried me forward. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing shadows of acceptance that never came. Our startup thrived. Maya and I hired new developers, turned our cramped office into a humming hive of energy. Some nights I stayed late, not because I was running from loneliness, but because I loved the work. The language of code still made more sense than most people ever had. But the real change wasn't just in paychecks or client lists. It was in the way I filled my days. The shelter became more than volunteering. It became a mission. We launched a tech program teaching residents computer skills, helping them rebuild resumes, giving them tools to stand again. The first time one of my students landed an interview using the code we'd practiced together, I cried in my car on the way home. The kind of tears my family had never earned. I didn't hear from Mom, Dad, or Alexis again. Not a text, not a call. Maybe they were too busy nursing resentment. Maybe they'd convinced themselves I was the villain in their story. Either way, the silence felt cleaner than their words ever had. Unexpectedly, I stayed in touch with Timothy Richards' younger brother. He messaged me on his 18th birthday, a blurry selfie of his first tattoo peeking from his shoulder. Finally legal, he wrote, grinning. His parents had cheered him on. Proof that what my family called shame could be celebrated somewhere else. As for holidays, I stopped showing up at doors that slammed. Last Christmas, I hosted my own dinner in my apartment. Zach brought wine. Maya cooked. Dylan and Kai showed up with mismatched chairs they borrowed from neighbors, so everyone had a seat. There were no polished cars in the driveway. No forced smiles for family photos. Just music, laughter, the scent of roasted chicken, and the warm chaos of people who had chosen each other. We exchanged small gifts, nothing flashy, nothing meant to buy love or approval, just tokens of thoughtfulness, inside jokes, handmade trinkets, bottles of cheap champagne. When I looked around the table, watching my friends laugh with mouths full, I realized something. This was family. Not the kind bound by blood or shame, but the kind forged by choice, by scars carried openly, by love given without conditions. I didn't send gifts to my parents or Alexis. Instead, I donated the money to expand the shelter's medical program. My mother would have called it a waste. To me, it felt like the best investment I'd ever made. Sometimes late at night, I still wonder if they'll ever realize what they lost. If one day they'll look at an empty chair and remember the daughter who refused to shrink to fit their picture. But I don't wait for that anymore. I don't ache for their approval. Because here's the truth. My revenge was never freezing that account. It wasn't exposing their lies to Richard's family. It wasn't even slamming the door figuratively this time in their faces. My revenge was living loudly, living authentically, living without apology. The blue hair, the tattoos, the laughter echoing through my apartment with friends who love me exactly as I am, the company I built from nothing, the strangers I helped find their footing again. That's the revenge they'll never understand. And honestly, it's the best kind.